Okay, wonderful. I'm seeing attendees starting to trickle in. Amazing. Hi everyone. Good to see folks joining. It's 11:03. We're gonna give it a couple minutes just to, let folks arrive. So just hang tight and let's give it a couple more minutes. Okay, I think it's 11:05. Oh, 11:06 now, and I think we have 29 folks, so I think we can get started. Just, and folks can continue to trickle in, of course. But let me make sure recording is on. Okay, great. Hello everyone, and welcome to HFHR's post-election organizing webinar. This is, something that we are very excited to have put together because, this obviously we're all, I think, reacting in our own ways to the results of the Indian election, and we want to create a space where folks can come together and sort of hear some strategy and thinking about like where do we go from here, because this is obviously a very big a very big moment for not just India, but for the diaspora as well. My name is Pranay Somayajula. I am the Organizing and Advocacy Director at Hindus for Human Rights. I'm sure many of y'all know about HFHR by now, but we are an organization that was founded in 2019, so coming up on 5 years, to be a Hindu voice of resistance to caste, to hindutva, Hindu nationalism, and really to all forms of hate, bigotry, and oppression around the world. That has always been our mission, and it continues to be so now. And to introduce us for today's webinar, I want to pass it over to my amazing colleague and our brilliant co-founder and executive director, Sunitha Vishwanath, to share a little bit about her story of why she founded HFHR and the importance of an organization like ours in this moment.
Thanks, Pranay, and welcome everybody. I'm Sunitha, one of the co-founders and the executive director. of Hindus for Human Rights, and it is very hard to believe that we're coming up on our 5th anniversary. For me, the journey of building a progressive anti-caste Hindu movement started a number of years before we co-founded Hindus for Human Rights. In 2011, actually, a number of things in my life sort of came to a head. And along with a few other co-journeyers, we co-founded an organization, a sister organization called Sadhana. So Sadhana, Coalition of Progressive Hindus, was founded in the fall of 2011. And each one of us who started that organization came, from our own life perspectives. One was a community organizer, one was a human rights activist, that was me, and the other person was a lawyer, progressive civil rights lawyer. And each of us was having, a very meaningful public life in which we were addressing social justice issues. But each one of us had this feeling of incompleteness because in the spaces where we were living our lives and doing our work, people from the other faith traditions were connecting their faith to their social justice journey. And we were Hindus, each one of us, and we were self-censoring. We were Hindu and, identified as Hindu, and were in our family lives. I have 3 kids, and at that point I had 2 kids, and I would take them to the temple. I was doing those kinds of things. But when I showed up in even interfaith spaces, I was showing up as a person, as a human being, as a progressive person, and deciding that, didn't need to say I was Hindu. It's nobody's business. And the few times that I did say I'm a Hindu, I would kind of, sense some tension in the space, that it wasn't a normal thing for progressive Hindus to identify as Hindu in those spaces. So conversations about that with some friends led to the creation of Sadhana. And I remember us saying that maybe there's a reason that there aren't progressive Hindu organizations the way there are in the other faith communities. We don't know what it is. We knew about Hindu American Foundation way back then. There was something, we couldn't put our finger on what it was about Hindu American Foundation, but it wasn't enough. We didn't just want to join them. In the early days of Sadhana, we worked with them and quickly found out that they're actually quite casteist and quite sympathetic to hindutva, Hindu nationalism. So we're like, oh, that was why we didn't just want to join them. And we started Sadhana. Sadhana still exists and does more kind of community-based work on domestic social justice issues, and really does a lot of work in organizing religious leaders, Hindu religious leaders who are anti-caste. In 2019, when we were founded, it was in the wake. It's interesting that we just went through Indian elections again, because Hindus for Human Rights was founded when 5 years ago, Modi was elected for his 2nd term with an even larger mandate than his 1st term. And I and a few others, there was some overlap with Sadhana, but a different group of people decided that we really needed an explicit human rights platform for Hindus to gather and actively, proactively build a movement to resist Hindu fascism, Hindu supremacy. So that was that when Modi was elected 5 years ago, in between this moment 5 years ago when he was elected as continued his term as his tenure as prime minister, and before he came to Texas to hug Trump on the stage of a stadium in Howdy Modi, in that in between few weeks, I think, we started Hindus for Human Rights, named ourselves and organized ourselves so we could be there outside Howdy Modi, and my sign said, "Real Hindus don't lynch." So that's some of the journey of how we got here. In the 5 years, Hindus for Human Rights has really gained notoriety. We're very proud of our battle scars. We get attacked almost every day by someone, left, right, center, everyone. Everyone loves to pick holes in what we're trying to do. But we think of them as all of that as validation for the fact that we need to be here and we need to be doing this work of mobilizing radicalizing Hindus. I think with the current staff team, which I cannot speak highly enough of, and I don't know if other staff members are in the group here in the audience, but Nandini and Pranay are here. I think under this staff leadership, I sense us really transforming from an advocacy organization into a movement organization, which is why we're having this call and hopefully many more like it. And I'll say about the Indian elections, there's a page on our website and there's a lot we've said about the Indian elections. And we could talk about that, but really the purpose of this call is to say, okay, the Indian elections have happened. What does it mean for our work in the diaspora? And so the Indian elections, they're not a victory. It's not an earthquake, as Christophe Jaffrelot just said in a webinar, in an interview with Karan Thapar this morning. But it's a tremor, and it's good news to some little extent, because if we had gone in the other direction and he got an even bigger mandate from the Indian citizens, we were ready for that. We would have marched further into this, whatever we want to call what the trajectory that India is on, further along the line towards a fascist regime in India. And that didn't happen. Their rule, their mandate has been punctured. And that is space that we have to take. First of all, we have to salute the Indian people. And it is mostly the people who are most affected by joblessness and other discrimination by this Hindutva party that have really spoken. And we need to salute them for saying, to the extent that we have power as voters, we are saying no to the hatred and divisiveness of the BJP. And the BJP has really lost its big, powerful mandate. We still have Modi, but he has to work with others. That is good news. But we can't kind of, celebrate good news, because as even, so shortly after the elections, we see that the UAPA is being used against Arundhati Roy. And a lot of what we've seen in the last 10 years is going to continue. So I'm going to hand it back over to Pranay, because the conversation that we need to have is every time India weaponizes and exists as a Hindu right-wing country, nation, rule, it has a Godzilla size imprint here in our diaspora communities. And that is where we are, and that is where we do our work. Everything we do is in coalition with Muslim, Dalit, Christian, secular, Sikh, etc. organizations. Everything we do is with our partners, and we build robust, diverse coalitions in which we work. And so that is a great base for organizing in our community. None of that organizing, I believe, none of it will have any impact if we don't include the majority South Asian community, which is us, which is Hindus. And so here we are with a very strong mandate to build anti-caste, anti-Hindutva, pro-love, pro-unity, pro-social justice Hindu movement. And if you're here today, you care about that. And so I welcome you into our movement and hand it back over to Pranay.
Thank you so much, Sunita. I will be honest and say I am regretting putting you at the beginning of this call, because that's a tough act to follow, but I will do my best. Yeah, just to sort of build on what Sunita has shared in those very powerful remarks, I want to sort of give a little bit of, as our organizing and advocacy director, my analysis from HFHR's perspective about what these election results mean. I have some slides, so let me get those shared here. Let me see if I can get this up and running. So present. All right, there we go. So yeah, this is to sort of talk through, I guess, very briefly what these results look like and what they mean. So of course, we all saw the news, the headlines coming out of India, and the ways in which this 2024 election campaign was marred by horrific anti-Muslim, anti-minority hate speech and divisiveness and communal rhetoric coming from Modi and other senior BJP leaders. As well as numerous very chilling reports of voter suppression, a crackdown on opposition parties, which included the suspension of 2/3 of the opposition members of parliament back in December. And in the run up to the elections over the last, several months, the last year, we've seen this ruling BJP regime undertake a number of steps intended to show strength and intimidate opponents. This is everything from raiding and shutting down critical media outlets like NewsClick and others to inaugurating the Ayodhya Ram Mandir back in January on the site of the demolished Babri Masjid. And all of these moves, we all know this, that these moves were part of a much larger trend we've been seeing over the last 10 years of growing extremism and declining democracy in India. And so all of this, of course, led many observers, myself included, to predict that this election would be a blowout, that it would be a landslide for the BJP, and that Modi would walk away from this election with an overwhelming mandate that he would need to deal a final death blow to secularism and democracy. I mean, and we even saw this with the way that the BJP was campaigning on a slogan of we're going to win 400 seats in parliament, and then that talking about amending the constitution to God knows what, right? So this was a really real fear that I know I had and many others had going into this election. But of course, by now we've all seen these results. Far cry from that 400-seat landslide that Modi and his allies had promised for the BJP's ruling NDA alliance. The BJP and its allies just barely scraped by with a majority of 293 seats, which is down from 353 in the 2019 elections. Of course, Modi, is still in power, was just sworn in for his third term as prime minister. But of course, with a significantly reduced mandate, and as Sunita pointed out, the need for him to govern in a coalition with other parties rather than with an absolute BJP majority. In addition, there were local level wins as well. Several top BJP leaders, including Cabinet Minister Smriti Irani, who has personally led a campaign of transnational repression against our organization, Hindus for Human Rights. She famously had a press conference where she held up a photo of Sunita with her face circled in red. Smriti Irani, among others, lost their seats. And the BJP famously even lost in the same Ayodhya constituency where the Ram Mandir is located. And we know that this loss was, delivered, this blow to the BJP was delivered by the high turnout among communities who have been most affected by Hindutva hatred. This is Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, but also, Hindus and others who come from oppressed caste communities, who came out to reject this monolithic upper caste dominant Brahminical idea of Hindu identity that the Hindu supremacist movement has tried to mobilize. And as Sunita said, this was their accomplishment, and we absolutely must salute them for taking this crucial step to keep democracy in India alive. So these are the results that we are working with. And these all raise the question of what does this mean? How big of a loss was this really for the Hindutva movement and the dreams of establishing a fascist Hindu ethno-state? So there's a recent op-ed that came out in the Indian news magazine The Wire, written by the legendary Dalit activist and scholar, and also HFHR's beloved advisory board member, Professor Anand Teltumde, who himself was a former political prisoner under the Modi regime. And in this op-ed, Professor Teltumde warns against easy jubilation about the election results. He writes, quote, "Most commentators expect Modi 3.0 to be a tamed affair which may not last a full term. I do not agree. While forming the government, he may do whatever it takes, but thereafter he will recoil back to his fascist persona with a vengeance, like a wounded tigress. He will do more of what he knew and did with the added fervor of a vendetta." And I personally think that Professor Teltumde, really, and again, this is someone who has been on the receiving end of Hindutva fascism, that he makes a crucial point here. This electoral setback for the BJP, is cause for celebration, but it by no means indicates that the threat to democracy and pluralism in India, this existential threat posed by Hindutva, that this has, simply vanished or disappeared altogether. And we've seen, even just in the days since the election results came out on June 4th, so it's been, 10, 11 days since then, we've seen Hindutva lynch mobs carrying out deadly attacks against minorities, in particular Muslims. We've seen, as Sunita mentioned, Delhi's lieutenant governor authorizing the prosecution of the dissident writer and activist Arundhati Roy under the draconian UAPA law. And we've seen authorities in BJP-ruled Uttar Pradesh launching yet another bulldozer demolition drive, destroying more than 1,000 homes in Muslim-majority areas. And this is all just in the last 10, 11 days. So all this means that, it is more crucial now than ever before, that we really double down on our fight against Hindutva extremism in India, but also around the world, in particular here in the diaspora and in the United States. So I want to talk a little bit about what this result means for diaspora organizing, which of course is the reason why we are all here on this call. So we know that the Hindu supremacist movement is very active in India. It has the Sangh Parivar network in India with the RSS at its center, but it has also established a very intricate network of organizations and affiliates across the entire diaspora, in particular the United States. Just like the Sangh Parivar in India, with the RSS at the center, consists of a vast and complex web of entities that span virtually every aspect of Indian civic and political life. The Sangh in the United States similarly covers a really wide range, everything from charitable organizations, educational institutions, political advocacy groups, and religious and cultural fronts. And all of these organizations share key personnel, genealogies, and funding flows. And we can kind of see like a very small like a snapshot of this network, again, by no means exhaustive, in the image on the left of the screen, which is taken from a report that was recently released by the Savera Coalition, which HFHR is a core member of. And as this diagram shows, at the center of the Sangh in the U.S. are two key organizations: the HSS, the Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, which is the RSS's overseas wing, and the VHPA, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, which is the American overseas wing of the VHP in India. But other key players in this ecosystem include groups like the Hindu American Foundation, who Sunita mentioned, and groups like the Coalition of Hindus of North America, KONA, among others. And this ecosystem really provides very significant ideological and material support to the Hindutva movement in India, not only by sort of image laundering, PR, to sort of make Hindutva out to be a more, innocent thing than it really is, but also by promoting a close U.S.-India relationship, but even more directly through financial support as well. A 2014 report, and the image on the right of the screen is like a table taken from that report, which found that between 2001 and 2012, the Sangh Parivar in the U.S. transferred as much as $55 million to Hindutva organizations in India. And the VHPA alone, through its own charitable initiatives like the Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation and the Support a Child Project, have funneled at least $7 million from India to India from the U.S. between 2001 and 2020. And you can see some more of these financial flows again in the table on the slide here. And the recipients of this money, the recipients in India, often present themselves as very independent and innocuous charities working for education, health, social welfare, and development in, particularly in deprived rural and tribal areas. But in fact, they are overwhelmingly deeply connected to the Hindutva ecosystem. There have been many reports from investigative journalists, Indian news outlets, and so on, which have found that these same charities that are receiving money from Hindutva organizations in the US in fact function on the ground to promote Hindutva ideology and anti-minority hatred and discrimination. For example, through educational indoctrination in the schools they construct, and they've even been accused of using their resources and their influence on the ground to openly campaign for the BJP during election seasons. So all of this means that the Hindutva movement in the US already has a very robust infrastructure here in the diaspora. And in the wake of this electoral setback in India, I really think that they're likely to lean even more heavily on this ecosystem, on this infrastructure in the diaspora for support. They're going to lean on it for more money. They're going to lean on it to, sort of launder the image of Hindutva among American civil society and policymakers, because they know that is key to maintaining legitimacy in India. And in the years to come, I think we're really likely to see a renewed effort by groups like the VHPA and its affiliates, and groups like the Hindu American Foundation and others, to whitewash and legitimize Hindu nationalism here in the United States. And that is why we need to be ready to mobilize and organize in our communities to counter their efforts. And just like this Hindutva movement in India relies so heavily on support from the diaspora networks, our allies in Indian civil society, like Sunita talked about, are counting on those of us who are insulated from these, because we're in the diaspora, we are insulated from the worst excesses of extremist violence and government repression. And our allies in Indian civil society are counting on us to forcefully speak out and mobilize against Hindutva fascism. In particular, I think it's really crucial, and Sunita spoke to this as well, that self-identified Hindus in the diaspora do the work of organizing against caste and against Hindutva in our own communities, talking to our aunties and uncles, talking to our family members in our WhatsApp groups, at our Desi gatherings, and so on. And that's exactly what a group like HFHR is trying to do. In the same way that organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace provide a home for progressive Jews to reject and resist Zionism, we want to do the same thing for progressive Hindus to reject and resist Hindutva and caste. And we want to, in the coming months and years, be establishing local chapters on the ground in cities across the US. We want to be doing political education, holding teach-ins, holding film screenings, holding discussion groups and reading circles in cities all over the country to educate our communities about these issues, because there's so much ignorance in our communities, or people think that, this is just an issue that is far away on the other side of the world. We're here in the US, this doesn't matter. But it is actually incumbent on us to be highlighting and providing this education. And that is one of the most crucial ways that we can be, I think, organizing and working against these forces in our own communities. So in light of this urgent situation that we find ourselves in today, I want to spotlight some other members of the HFHR team and community who are doing this work in the diaspora, but in other parts of the diaspora. So I'm going to stop this slides, and I want to begin with a video from our UK organizer, Rajiv, who couldn't make it in person or live with us today, but who recorded a message to share. And then after that, I will pass it off to our Australian New Zealand organizer, Nandini, who is on this call, despite it being, past 1 a.m. her time. So, but I'll begin with, let me pull up Rajiv's video here. Share screen. Okay. All right, let's begin this video.
Hindus for Human Rights UK. I'm Rajiv Sinha. I'm the director of Hindus for Human Rights UK. What a result. This has been a clear statement from the Indian people on a campaign of hatred, fear, and bigotry. Whilst we still have a lot of the same executive leadership in place, the people who spearheaded that campaign of hatred, fear, and bigotry, we saw a clear signal that this politics is not overwhelmingly what people want. We must allow ourselves to celebrate. We should celebrate that Indian democracy is a little stronger than many people, including me, thought, because we saw a glimpse of a different kind of winning campaign. We should celebrate because the constituency of Ayodhya in UP, the home of the newly established Ram Mandir, which the Prime Minister was so personally involved with, was won not by the politics of Hindutva, but by the politics of reform and equality. And we should celebrate because there is now less of a mandate to push through the bills and proclamations that I, for one, feared would take place under a third term building off of the majorities of 2014 and 2019. But we must not allow ourselves to get complacent. As our co-founder Sunita Vishwanath put it so well, now our real work as Hindus for Human Rights begins. This is only a political setback for the ideology of Hindutva. Hindutva itself has not gone anywhere, so now we get back to it. Here in the UK, where I'm based, there's a lot of work to be done. Hindutva networks, money, and lobbyists are deeply embedded in British society, just as they are in the US. I want to make good use of the cracks in Hindutva brought about by this election in India to raise awareness of this malicious influence in British politics and society. I'm hoping, and I'm already somewhat seeing, that the results of the general election have made people a little more level-headed when talking about this strand of hate politics. Anecdotally speaking, I'm picking up on a bit of a theme of people who would previously have spoken of the glory of Indian politics over the last 10 years, now saying that they never thought very highly of all that. Whilst this might be frustrating in some ways, it is something I think we should capitalize on. In this moment of weakness for Hindutva politics, we should maximize our efforts to reach out to people, raise awareness, and crucially, to forge ahead with our positive, loving, all-inclusive vision of our Hindu dharma. This is a brief period of opportunity after years of madness. Many people didn't see this result coming, many people did. In any case, I think things often seem inevitable until they are eventually cut to size, as Rajmohan Gandhi put it in his piece in Himmat. So let's make sure Hindus for Human Rights goes from strength to strength for the sake of a Britain free from extremist influence and for the sake of our beloved secular India.
Well, I wish Rajiv was here so I could thank him, for those lovely remarks. And I should just say that like Rajiv has been in less than a year has been established HFHR as an organization in the UK as a known entity, has built connections with other partners who have been activists who have been doing this work, for years, and is really the work he's been doing really highlights the need to be, we often talk about the diaspora as the US, but there are Hindus and Indians and South Asians all over the world, and particularly in the UK, who we need to be organizing in those communities as well. And another place where, there is a large diaspora community that we need to be organizing against hindutva in is the other side of the globe, Australia and New Zealand. And so again, despite it being a truly ungodly hour for her time, our amazing Australia and New Zealand organizer Nandini is here. So I'll pass it over to you, Nandini, to share your reflections on this moment. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Pranay. And, it doesn't happen often that we have to wake up at this ungodly hour, so I wouldn't miss this opportunity. I think it's an important discussion, and it's important for all of us to sort of connect on this issue. As some of you may know, Hindus for Human Rights Australia was established in 2021. There was an urgent need for that because there was a spate of violent attacks on Sikh Australians by Hindu nationalists. And this was because they were protesting, they were demonstrating, to express solidarity with the farmer protests. And that's how it all started. And I have to say, unfortunately, the need for Hindus for Human Rights has only grown because, well, one is that Indians are the fastest growing diaspora in Australia, and we're a lot of us here. And the second thing is now more than ever, what happens in India rarely stays in India. So all the hate speech, the disinformation, the WhatsApp groups, all of that sort of infiltrates society here. And Australia has had a large presence of the Hindutva networks. Again, institutionalized. They do some good work as well in certain spaces, but then there's also the other side, which is, the whole hate speech and this whole supremacist viewpoint that we do feel that it has a deeper impact beyond the Indian community. So having said that, the work that we want to do is really advocacy, and then we're also doing community building and building coalitions. And now with the election results, while there is hope among the diaspora, and especially among progressive voices, that there seems to be a window of opportunity, as Sunita has said, that our work has only just again begun. And in fact, whatever the result would have been, it wouldn't have stopped in any case, because these institutions and these structures that are discriminatory and that ideologically are quite poisonous to a cohesive society, they take time to dismantle, and they take all of us coming together to dismantle. So that work continues. One of the things we do feel, and this is not just about Australia, I think this is about diasporic communities everywhere, is the strong need for connection. And this connection with India is an opportunity, we feel, that we can actually play a huge role in providing an alternative, because whenever Indian diaspora has sought to make those connections, the strongest sort of visible groups have been the Hindutva groups. And sometimes those have kind of taken the stage where there may not be ideological connection with everybody who supports them, but they're looking for connection. And that seems to be the most available. So I think that's a huge area of opportunity. And here in Australia, we have done a lot of interfaith work. We've done interfaith celebrations like an interfaith Holi. We've co-sponsored a climate conscious iftar where everybody from the community comes together to celebrate things together. Recently, we also, during the elections, we also spearheaded the Uniting for Peace campaign, which basically draws on things of commonality and nostalgia within the Indian community, which brings us all together, whether it's art or movies or culture. So there is all of that sort of soft diplomacy that plays a huge role. But at the same time, I think we have to call out elected officials, and we have to continue doing this more, who by design or inadvertently do end up supporting and platforming leaders from the Hindutva groups. And we have to continue to ask that if those are the kind of people with that ideology they actually want to support, given where they come from and given the institutions that they represent. So that work continues. I think in Australia, as we're hearing from everywhere, the work has only just begun, and we're very happy and we're very thankful for everybody who has supported us so far. We've built wonderful connections with Muslim leaders and communities, Sikh leaders, communities, Dalit leaders and communities. So we hope that this work, we continue to do together. And as because we draw from different faiths, I will draw on the beautiful Buddhist teaching, which is before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, and after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So that's pretty much what we're doing. We just continue the good work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nandini. That was beautiful, and I think couldn't put it better myself. We're here to chop wood and carry water, but I'll just say as well that to the point about the ways in which people often end up inadvertently platforming these Hindutva organizations or leaders, that's a big thing that comes up, and I think is like in terms of very concretely, like what can we be doing to organize like in our communities, is like the first step, the prerequisite for anything is political education, whether that's educating elected officials about these issues, who are especially non-Desi leaders who have no idea about Hindutva, don't know anything about this, educating civil society organizations who might be partnering with the Hindutva group for something, but also educating just our friends, our neighbors, and community members. That's the Severa Coalition that HFHR is a part of, has been trying to produce research reports and resources for this political education. Just last week, I facilitated a workshop with local organizers in the Twin Cities, my hometown in Minnesota, about this, and that was a theme that really came up, was that, for example, if like some city or county in Minnesota is having their India Day, to celebrate the Indian community there, they end up just inviting the Hindu temple. They just invite the Hindu organizations, because the whole project of Hindu nationalism, right, is to say that Hindu equals India equals Hindu, and there's nothing else involved there. And that narrative gets so successfully promoted that then well-meaning people who don't have a familiarity with these issues end up buying into it and then end up reinforcing these same narratives. So the biggest thing that came out of that conversation last week, and so many conversations I've been having over the last many months and the last few years, has been to the importance of finding new, innovative, engaging ways to spread this information. Putting out reports is great. I've written my fair share of them, but also a 50-page report is only as good as the number of people who read it. So it really is about finding new ways to to facilitate these conversations. And that's just something I want to keep driving home. I know we had, you might have seen on Instagram or on social media, we had announced a special guest, Suchitra Vijayan. Unfortunately, she isn't able to make it today, due to a last-minute conflict that came up. But I just, want to also say that if folks do have questions about specific questions or anything else, to please drop those in the Q&A function. And I'm happy to answer those. But otherwise, we're also coming up in the last 15-20 minutes of this call, and maybe we can let y'all out a bit early. So I want to sort of conclude by talking about concrete actions. Like everyone who has spoken, myself, Nandini, Sunita, Rajiv on this call so far has talked about the importance of doing this work. But what does that work? What can we be doing? I've talked about education, political education, just having these conversations in our communities, but there are some specific steps that we're asking folks to take. Before I jump into that, I want to share one final video from someone who is probably a familiar name to many of you. And that is the, very, very legendary South Asian American progressive Desi organizer Deepa Iyer, who wasn't able to join us today, but recorded a very powerful video that I think really helps frame and sort of set the stage for the calls to action that I want to conclude with. So I will share now Deepa's video right here.
For human rights community. Hello to the Hindus for Human Rights community. My name is Deepa Iyer, and I'm a lawyer, writer, and activist. I have worked closely with Asian American, South Asian, Muslim, Arab, Sikh, and immigrant rights organizations since 9/11. Thank you so much for asking me to share some calls to action for Hindu Americans, Indian Americans, and South Asian Americans to build upon the movement and momentum that we've seen recently with the Indian elections in order to dismantle Hindu supremacy here in the United States. So I'm going to share a few slides because I think that they will help me provide some of this information to you. So in my book about post 9/11 America, I trace the vibrant histories of organizing in South Asian American communities and observed that often South Asians have been galvanized by unexpected moments or social crises. For example, in the wake of anti-immigrant policies and mob attacks, such as the one that happened in Bellingham, Washington in 1907, Indian immigrants fought through the courts for their right to become U.S. citizens. And after September 11th, in the midst of the backlash that ranged from hate violence and bullying to state-sanctioned profiling and surveillance, South Asians responded by creating a broad ecosystem of organizations and by building solidarity with Muslim and Arab communities. This happened again in the midst of the Trump administration when we saw bans and raids and hate violence at a high level targeting so many communities of color, including ours. Whenever there have been important moments in the United States and around the world, from the Oak Creek Gurdwara massacre in Wisconsin to the murder of George Floyd or the struggle for Palestinian liberation, South Asian Americans have risen up. And right now, we have another such opportunity. The recent elections in India have shown the world that the ideology of Hindu supremacy has absolutely no place in a multi-faith, multi-class democracy. This is a movement moment, and it's one that occurred as a result of the tremendous organizing and resistance in India, led by students, independent journalists and filmmakers, Punjabi farmers, and everyday people who rejected the idea that India should become a Hindu-first nation. Whether this moment widens the aperture for justice and equity is up to all of us. As Indian Americans, we can take 4 steps now to address Hindu supremacy, build solidarity, and recommit to justice. First, it is so important to start and to continue our learning journeys. This becomes really hard sometimes in the age of disinformation, but thankfully there is a range of scholarship and popular education materials out there from groups like HFHR, the Severa Coalition, and many others, which can help us understand the roots, history, and dangerous impact of Hindu supremacy. Step 2, start personal and local. Armed with information and facts, we can now begin to have hard and brave conversations with our families, our uncles and aunties in our WhatsApp groups and online. For example, we can bust the myths and misperceptions about caste discrimination. And this is especially important to those of us born into upper caste Hindu families. We must use our privilege and our positionality to disrupt caste and Hindu supremacy at every turn. Step 3, find our ecosystems. This means that we gather with the people and the organizations that share our values, our goals, and our hopes. There is now a plethora of organizations like HFHR that have formed over the past few decades and that are engaged in countering Hindu supremacy, caste discrimination, transnational repression, and more. Find an organization that you connect with, support it with your time, your skills, and your donations, and bring its programs to your own local community and campus. Finally, step 4, find a role in service to our collective vision. Each of us can play vital roles to move our collective goals forward. One tool that I want to humbly offer is the Social Change Ecosystem Map, which I developed to help individuals and organizations identify how they can plug into social change, especially during moments of crisis. For example, perhaps you're a storyteller who can write an essay in your campus or city publication about why we must address caste bias. Or maybe you're a builder who brings people together to push for an anti-caste bill in your city council. Or perhaps you are a weaver who can make connections between addressing Hindu supremacy and white nationalism, especially as the elections come up in the United States. There are so many roles that all of us can play in this moment to galvanize our communities with compassion and solidarity. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves, and so I hope you can join me, HFHR, and the growing number of people and organizations here in the US, in India, and around the world. Thank you.
That was, a very, very powerful, I think, reflection from Deepa, who is, just a giant, someone I really look up to as an organizer when I was first getting involved with like South Asian left and progressive and anti-hindutva work, someone who I really looked up to, who had like paved the way, I think, for a lot of the work that HFHR and our partner organizations are doing now. And especially, Deepa talked about in the post 9/11 era, in the post 9/11 era, the solidarity that was built between South Asian communities and others, and that solidarity is now being undermined by the hate and supremacy being spread by the Hindutva ecosystem, including in the US, particularly the Islamophobia that the VHPA and other organizations are spreading, and that really underscores the need for this work to be done. And so okay, it looks like Suchitra has been able to join us, which is wonderful. Hi, Suchitra, welcome.
Hey, I'm
Before
so I'm so sorry. It's just that one of our researchers got picked up by the cops, and then we had to deal with something. I'm so sorry. So I just got in as soon as I could. I'm so sorry. It's just been a crazy day.
do not
My
apologize.
sincerest apologize. My sincerest apologies. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Please go ahead, Pranay. I'm so sorry.
It's quite,
Absolutely no need to apologize.
I hope that's that's
Thank you for
horrifying.
coming.
Thank you for being here in light of all of this. And I think that also actually, I mean, everyone in the audience, y'all heard this underscores the need. Like I was saying, right? Even after this election, this repression is still happening, and we're hearing it from Suchitra. So since Deepa did just set us up with this, like, I think, great framework for thinking about ways for us to take action, and Suchitra, I will share Deepa's video with you after this. I think you would find it really valuable too. This Deepa Iyer recorded a great video for us, but I want to share a few calls to action, and then we'll actually conclude with some insights from Suchitra. I know we'll go a little past the hour, so hopefully folks can stay on a bit. But let me share my screen once again to run through these two specific calls to action that we have here. Sorry, all right. So we've heard a lot about the importance of doing something, but what can we do? What is that something? So the first thing is a petition that has been launched by the Severa Coalition. As I mentioned, HFHR is like proud to be an honor to be a core member of the Severa Coalition against Hindu supremacy. And this petition demands that YouTube takes meaningful steps to deplatform US-based Hindu supremacist hate channels and extremists who are using their platforms on YouTube to spread hate and violence. And one of the main targets of this petition, who we are asking YouTube's leadership, who is himself Indian American, to deplatform, is an individual named Vibhuti Jha. He is a New Jersey-based VHPA affiliate who runs a very popular web show on YouTube called the Jaipur Dialogues, and he has used this show repeatedly to platform and interview, really, really hateful anti-Muslim extremists. In particular, most notoriously, Yati Narasimhanand, who is a Hindutva monk from India, who made headlines in December 2021 for openly calling for the genocide of Muslims in India. And this individual has been welcomed onto Vibhuti Jha's show multiple times, has spread that same hate and hate speech and extremism on this show. So we're demanding that YouTube take action to deplatform Vibhuti Jha. There's a QR code on the right of the screen to scan that QR code or visit tinyurl.com/deplatformhate to please sign that petition and to share it with people you know. When you've signed I've opened up the chat for folks. So when you've signed the petition, if you can, drop a little message in the chat for everyone to see, so that we can hold each other accountable, because that's also a big part of this work, is accountability and making sure that we are, actually doing this. This is like a small step, but a significant one to send this message to the folks on YouTube. So again, you can scan the QR code on the right to sign and share this petition, or visit tinyurl.com/deplatformhate. Amazing. I'm seeing some messages come in. I'll give y'all another, 10-15 seconds to open that up. And again, once you've signed it, please share it. Share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, and in your groups. This is really a really important, if we can get him deplatformed, that is a very significant blow to this ecosystem. He's one of their main mouthpieces here in the US. So I will then now bring to the other call to action, in some ways the even the bigger ask, but a very important one, is to become a member of Hindus for Human Rights if you haven't already. You might have seen already, launched a membership program in the last couple months. And the goal of this program is to it's not just to say we have X number of members. We really are committed to building a movement of grassroots progressive Hindus and allies. You don't have to be a Hindu. Not all of our members are Hindu. Not even all of our staff are Hindu. If you believe in our shared values of unity and peace and democracy and standing against hate, caste, Hindutva, and so on, you are welcome in our movement. And we want to, build this capacity that we need to be organizing in our communities. By becoming a member of HFHR, you'll be helping sustainably grow this movement into the future. And we'll be sharing more resources in the coming weeks and months on ways to activate our members to take action in your communities. We'll be producing resources and guidance on everything from organizing local events, writing letters to the editor, meeting with your local elected officials. So, that's just a small snippet of the kind of things that we're hoping to activate our membership base to do. So again, so you can scan this QR code on the right of the screen, or visit tinyurl.com/joinhfhr. Once you become a member, or if you already have become a member, at whatever level makes the most sense for you, please share with at least 3 friends or family members and ask them to join our movement as well. In the chat, Shravya, if you could drop the message I'd sent you. It has a link both to the joining page and also to a membership FAQ guide that our amazing comms team put together, which has answers to FAQs, more information about the membership program, that you can share that guide along in your communities, in your WhatsApp groups, your family circles and friend groups, and so on. That would be awesome. Thank you so much, Shravya, for dropping those 2 links in the chat. And again, you can either go to the link in the chat to become a member, scan this QR code, or just type in tinyurl.com/joinhfhr. This is just the beginning. Once you're a member, we're going to be following up, especially after our summer membership drive kind of wraps up, and to really be taking this forward. We want to have local chapters. We want to be holding events. We want, when there are, for example, protests for Gaza or other issues, we want to be turning out our local members to those protests as HFHR, and we want to be able to organize actions of our own. If next time Modi comes to the US, to DC or the Bay Area or New York, we want to be able to really turn out in numbers, and this is how we do that. So thank you guys so much. I will stop my screen share now, and I will, pass it over to our special guest, who I'm so glad you're able to join us even in spite of the the chaos, and I really hope that your researcher is okay, and I'm really sorry to hear this has happened. But we are honored to be joined today by Suchitra Vijayan. Many of you likely know, reputation precedes her, a barrister, a lawyer, and the author of the critically acclaimed book Midnight's Borders: A People's History of Modern India, which I personally cannot recommend enough. One of the best books I've read in the last few years. And also has author of How Long Can the Moon Be Caged? Voices of Indian Political Prisoners. She is the 2023 New York Foundation for the Arts Fellow in Nonfiction Literature, the founder and executive director of the Polis Project, and teaches at NYU Gallatin and Columbia University. So, Suchitra, I'll pass it over to you to, share just any, reflections or thoughts you have about these election results. What do they mean, and what do we do now in the diaspora in particular going forward? And I know that you're so connected to people on the ground in India who are, risking a lot to be fighting this fight. So any insights you have from their experience as well, would love to hear. And again, thanks for being here today.
Pranay, thank you. Thank you to Sunita for always holding space, and everyone who's made time on a Saturday morning. So again, I want to start by saying that I think what happened today is a good reflection of where we need to be in terms of the diaspora, and where we need to be in terms of organizing both within the diaspora and being connected to people on the ground. A couple of weeks, less than a week ago, I think all of us were just incredibly happy simply because of the results, the election results. And one of the things that it proved to us was that we have to listen to people on the ground. This was not a free and fair election in India. We have to understand that every institution in India, whether it was the Election Commission, the police, the judiciary, including the media, the pundits, all of them were convinced that BJP was going to have a win. The day before the election results were out, I was getting media requests from people asking me to write about what Modi's third term with a 350 plus 400 plus win would be. So the entire media ecosystem, our pundits and institutions had decided and already given Modi and BJP a win that they did not deserve and they were not going to get. So I think one of the things that we should be wary of is who we listen to, which should always be people on the ground, and what expectations that we build around our own organizing. So I think that is the first thing. The second thing is the idea that a lot of people floated soon after this was the idea that because Modi returns to power with much fewer seats, coalition politics is going to moderate his behavior. And something that I said a couple of days ago in another conversation was that Modi is going to become more vicious, that he is going to go after those who resisted and those who made this kind of a coalition win that made it a defeat possible, and he is going to be more vicious. And we've seen this happen. In the last week, we've had two caravan journalists who covered the Delhi pogrom have charges against them. Yesterday, we saw a 10-year-old case against Professor Shaukat Sen and Arundhati Roy revived through UAPA. And today, in our own organization, one of our researchers, we have a network of anonymous researchers that we work with. Some of them are current researchers, others are researchers from the past. One of them was targeted precisely because they were trying to do interview in a certain, I can't give more information. And again, we now had to very quickly mobilize and then figure out a way to make sure that they are safe. So one of the things that we should keep in mind is that it's going to get harder for people on the ground to do the kind of work that they're doing. I do expect this government to become more vicious. And I'm sure people like Sunita and others who've done this work for a really long time realize can speak more eloquently towards the dangers of just being on the ground in India. So given that we do have a small ray of hope, and we should continue building on the ray of hope, but without being conned into the sense of false relief that India's democracy has been revived. That is not the case. I think the fight for India's democracy and the fight for justice, equality, and dignity is going to be a generational fight. If hindutva was a 100-year cultural project, the fight to reclaim our society is also going to be a 100-year fight. And we should simply see ourselves in part of a much longer and larger plan, but also a marathon in which we start the work, and then we keep doing this work, and hopefully we continue to build a new generation of leadership that'll take on from us, and that leadership then begins to create another group and movement. So there is a line of inheritance where we teach people to continue this fight. And of course, the strategies of those fight will change. But now I've always believed that I have lived outside of India since I was 17, which means that I have far more power in New York than I do back in India. And how do we now begin to leverage those connections and networks here? One thing that we do have in our favor in the United States is that the institutions have not been completely taken over, which means that if we mount a legal battle or a procedural battle within the United States, we are highly likely to win, as against India, where the legal institutions, we don't know how the legal institutions will turn. Second, I think the space to organize is always in the realm of culture. The reason why BJP, RSS, and the right wing seems to be so effective in this organizing is that culturally, they have always held a kind of power that the left and progressive groups are now beginning to understand. I think the realm of organizing should be in culture. And again, I think the third thing is, of course, Palestine. I think Palestine has really just created a space for people to come together in a way they haven't before. And I think a lot of us who are fighting against Modi, BJP, RSS, and any kind of right-wing extremism have to understand that these fights are connected. There is no way we are going to fight and win this battle if we do not build those connections across social movements within the United States. We need to be in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. We need to be in solidarity with our Black brothers and sisters. We need to be part of the Latinx movement. We need to understand the debates that are happening within the immigration community. I think that's really where we need to start building those things. And I think the building blocks of that is already beginning. And I'm happy to answer more questions. I understand that I'm really late. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm again happy to answer if there are any specific questions.
Thank you so much, Suchitra, for those insights. And I'm glad you actually, drew this connection to Palestine too. I think that is something where, I got into anti-Hindutva work personally through Palestine Solidarity. It was actually through college conversations with my anti-Zionist Jewish friends and talking about how their relationship to their Jewish identity had sort of evolved as they became involved in anti-Zionist and pro-Palestine activism. That got me thinking, this is the same time as Modi's re-election in 2019, that got me thinking more critically about these issues in regard to India. And I think that this has been a really powerful opportunity for these last 8 months since the genocide in Gaza began to be drawing connections between Zionism and Hindutva. People, the violence being deployed in Gaza right now by the Israeli regime is, so intimately connected with what is happening in India, whether it's, Indian oligarchs like Adani manufacturing weapons for Israel, or Indian police officers and soldiers going to Israel to train and then using those methods of repression, whether it's in Kashmir or in other parts of India, other parts of the country. And so that this has been an opportunity, I think, for us to provide, we talked about a lot about political education. I know we produced, HFHR produced resources, a zine and a teach-in template for student encampments to share resources on Hindutva and Zionism that was very well received. And so this is a sort of thing too of how can we leverage political issues that are, on everybody's mind to draw these connections, not in a way that draws attention away or, tries to like vie for the spotlight, but instead to show that all of these fights and these struggles are interconnected. If folks have, questions for Suchitra, or, for Nandini or for myself or Sunita, you can either use the Q&A function or drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we can also, wrap this up, because I know this is I really appreciate everyone taking a little more than an hour out of their Saturday mornings. I mean, here in DC, it's a beautiful day. I'm sure it's beautiful elsewhere too. So, yeah, if there are any questions that folks have, I'll just give it a second here. And if not, then I think oh, yes,
sorry,
please,
I did
Lindsay.
see some questions about how these kind of movements, progressive movements, can be supported in India. I'm not sure where I saw that, but there was a question.
Nandini, we answered them in writing.
Ah, okay, all right.
Yes. Actually, yeah, I can, Sunita gave a really lovely response to the question, which was about like, what can HFHR do in India in this post-election scenario? We are, as Sunita pointed out in her response, a diaspora-based organization. And I think like Suchitra said, we have more power in DC, in New York, in the Bay Area, we're here in the diaspora in Australia and in the UK than in India, just because that's where our support are. But we have many advisory board members, many friends and supporters and allies in India. Everything we're doing, obviously, ultimately is in service of and in partnership with those people on the ground who are really risking everything to be engaged in this fight. And, we also have been, our Twitter account is banned in India. Many people have said, like, who maybe a few years ago would have been much more willing to publicly affiliate with us who are based in India, now have a lot more fear, just given the climate. And that's a very real, a real challenge that we face. Hopefully, we would love to hope that this election result maybe eases that a little bit, but for all the reasons that I think have been shared on this call, that hope is very, very qualified. And it's kind of a we'll believe it when we see it sort of thing. But for now, I think the biggest thing we can be doing is to do this work in the diaspora, especially because, as I mentioned in my slides, the Hindutva movement in India is getting so much support, not just ideologically and politically, but directly monetarily and financially from the diaspora, from its affiliates here. So if we can work to do whatever we can to disrupt that flow of support, we are making a very tangible difference in India. And that's something that, I know I've heard in conversations with our allies and supporters in India, and that like, this is not, just I think us trying to figure out how can we be useful, but this is something that, we've been told time and time again, that like this work in the diaspora is so crucial for that reason. And for the other question about providing resources and guides on like how to have these conversations for political education, I'd also mentioned in the chat, the Severa Coalition, we are severa.org. I will drop that in the chat here as well. This is where we've been producing reports and other one-pagers and resources on a lot of these issues. Suchitra's project, the Polis Project, has a lot of really amazing, like analysis and reporting of like what's actually happening on the ground in India. These are really great resources to be sharing out. And in the, I'll say in the coming weeks and months, HFHR and Severa are going to be producing more kind of like guides of how to have these difficult conversations, how to hold a workshop on these issues in your community. Again, like I said, and I keep saying, a 50-page report is only as good as the number of people who are reading it. So we want to make sure we're getting this information out as widely as possible. So Chitra, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. I think one of the things that we forget is that the work we do is only possible if we are able to raise resources for organizations like Hindus for Human Rights. And I think it's absolutely important that everyone here today find ways to support organizations like Hindus for Human Rights. I think that's absolutely important. Please put your time, money, resources, material support to organizations like Hindus for Human Rights. And I think that's absolutely important. The more base that organizations like this build, I think the more it's going to benefit us as we build this forward. And the other thing that I want to say is that at Polis Project, we've been putting out, we're starting a series of prison diaries from BK16 political prisoners, some of them who have been released. So Arun Ferreira's prison writings was published today. So we're going to have political prisoners actually talk about their own writings coming out. We're also going to be doing more work on demolitions that's happening in India, and also the ongoing, we have a disappearances project that's looking at disappearances of bodies, borders, and also land and what's been happening in those things. And I think all of this work, I think, is important because you need information. So it's educate, agitate, organize. So I think what organizations like Polis and others do is educate, but to agitate and organize is when we rely on organizations like Hindus for Human Rights to take all of this work that we have done and then take it to a broader audience. And all of that is not going to happen if you don't put your material support. So please support Hindus for Human Rights. And then, of course, anything else that you can do, please do. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just that I was going to say this when I was speaking, and then I realized that I was a little rushed. So yeah, please support Hindus for Human Rights.
Well, thank you so much, Chitra, for that. I mean, I think that's a really powerful note to end on. I have dropped the link once again in the chat, both to the Severa website, but also to become a member of HFHR. Please join us. Please spread the word. We can't do this work without you. And if there is anything to take away from today's call, it is that we all need to be doing this work. It is there is no, we have no other option. And this is absolutely crucial. Thank you all so much for taking the time. Thank you to Nandini for, again, joining at a really horrible hour in Australia. And thank you to Suchitra for joining us, even amid all the chaos that's going on. And thank you all so much. Have a great weekend. Take care. And we'll talk again very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.